Okay, so the next speaker is Hari Prasad.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to see all of you and to hear your presentations. For me, as a relatively new ONS member, it is indeed a privilege, and I mean that sincerely, because I've heard of a number of you and read your articles over the years. So I'm not flattering you when I say that you have my admiration. And the coin of which I will speak today doesn't have some of these quasi-legendary qualities of some of the more unusual coins you have spoken about today. And I'm sharing the first slide on screen. I only have two, basically, as I try to keep the talk to just a very few minutes. It's not an extraordinarily rare coin, and it's all I can say is it's relatively rare, but for me it is very satisfying because I taught myself to read Arabic recently after several other languages. After my career as an economist for the World Bank and international diplomat, administrator, I moved into ancient Greek and Latin. And I've been interested in coins all my life. So from classical Greek and Roman coins, I moved into Indian coins. And so here we are now in my current phase of Sultanate coins. And I've practiced actually reading Arabic on Sultanate coins during this pandemic. So that's part of the attraction of this coin, which I wanted to share with you. It's a dinar, which makes it somewhat different from the more common tankas of the Delhi sultans. And Muhammad, as he was called by his contemporaries, the wonder of the world, like Frederick II Hohenstaufen in the West. Because of his extraordinary learning and his brilliance, also issued the most complex, the most varied, and the most innovative coins of the Delhi Sultanate over 3 centuries and more. There is no particular mint mentioned on this coin, but the border on the obverse here on the right is very close in its zinc foil to a very rare dinar of Alauddin Khilji. It's actually, I believe, a D221A in the Quran and Goenka reference. And it sort of harks back in a way to the Padmatankas, the lotus pagodas. I believe it's just a speculation. So perhaps it was issued from there. Anyway, most coins of the reign were issued at Delhi or Daulatabad, the 2 capitals. And if this was indeed issued at Daulatabad, that's a very unusual period in the history of India, when for the first and only time, for something like 7 years, an all India empire was ruled from a capital in the south of the country. That makes it all the more interesting. The legends are very interesting, sort of enigmatic, some have commented, because Muhammad has no grandiose titles like Alauddin Khilji. He's not the second Alexander or anything like that. He is just the slave who hopes in the mercy of Allah. He is the son of, and the legend stops at that unusual word, bin, son of. So if we read it here, Zuriba, he is a man struck in the time of Al-Abd, the slave, Al-Raji, the one who hopes for Rahmat Allah, the mercy of Allah, Muhammad bin. And on the other side, on the reverse, is the Sultan who is indeed glorified, Muhammad's father, Ghiyath-ul-Din. So you have the Al-Sultan Al-Sa'id, the honorable, you could translate perhaps, because this was earlier than the time when Sa'id meant a descendant of the Prophet. Al-Shahid, the martyr, Tughlaq Shah, and then you have the date written out in full, 729 Hijri. which would put it as 1328, 1329 AD. Now, it's enigmatic, as I said, because there was at least one contemporary, the famous Ibn Battuta, the global traveler who spent time at Muhammad's court as a judge, actually, who alleged that Muhammad had plotted to murder his father. We can't say that this was true necessarily. It could simply have been Muhammad's way of insisting on his legitimate claim to the throne as the formally appointed heir of the founder of the dynasty, Tughlaq Shah. But maybe it's more than that, who knows? Was he hoping for the mercy of Allah for a crime? So I leave you with that thought without pursuing it any further. The tragedy of Muhammad's reign is that in spite of his many accomplishments, his relative open-mindedness in religious matters, his famous generosity, and in spite of using the harshest punishments anyone can imagine, with an atrocious cruelty, he could not hold the empire together. I'll just show you very briefly a map, and that will give you a simple glimpse at the extent of the empire. It stretched from the Indus in the west to the Ganges and the Brahmaputra in the east, Sunargaon, as you see there. And in the south, all the way farther south than any empire before, Madura, Mabar, as it was called, was a province of the empire, briefly. Here on this side, closer to what is now Afghanistan, Ghazna, etc., was Chagatai Mongol territory, the descendants of the Mongol hordes. And there had been several Mongol invasions of India, which ravaged the Punjab. Starting in the time of Mangu Khan, Lahore and Multan were besieged. And in the time of Muhammad bin Tughlaq, in the time of this particular coin, the Mongols came in their last major invasion to beyond Delhi, to Meerut, and actually approached very close to Delhi. So Muhammad shut himself up there to defend the capital, and the Mongols withdrew because they were defeated at Meerut. The siege was raised. So in any case, Muhammad had to defend against this threat. He raised an enormous expeditionary army, sent it to the northern mountainous country. Khorasan had a bigger definition in those days. He lost the expedition in the mountains. He raised other special armies, which ended, one of which at least additionally ended in disaster. He had a standing army, they say, of about 600,000 men, reliably estimated. So it was a huge force for those times. He fought campaign after campaign. He lost about 200,000 in a terrible epidemic. You should remember this was the time of the Great Plague in the West. And India was also struck by epidemic. The military kept shrinking from all these factors. His revenues kept shrinking. He used up the huge stock of gold which had been accumulated at Delhi from plundering the southern Hindu kingdoms. And these were no longer there as a source of revenue because they had all been annexed by now. So the empire broke apart, and it wasn't helped by his extravagance, by the chain of garrisons, the vastly expanded civil administration, all of which required more and more expenditures. Muhammad himself commented that when he turned to face one rebellion, another would flare up behind him. In his reign of 26 years, there were 22 rebellions. To find ways to meet the shortage of silver at the time, he issued a debased coinage. He issued token coinage in brass and copper, and that brought up inflation to, they say, about 500%. Taxes were paid in token coins, so that didn't help revenues at all. Muhammad died 1351. They say with a smile on his lips and a verse of his own composition. The best obituary of him, the best epitaph perhaps, was of a contemporary who said, "The Sultan was finally rid of the people, and his people were rid of their Sultan." So that's the fascination of the coin for me. I just wanted to share that. And thank you again for the chance.
Thank you, Hari. That was very interesting.